I feel like there's never a time in your life when you're not busy. You seem to get busier as time goes by. Does it feel like that to you?
It does. And the lockdown didn't really stop that. Getting really, really, really ill stopped it for a while. But yeah, you only get one life, so you might as well do stuff.
Very much so. And we're going to live 1998 for the best part of the next hour, because you've just reissued your 1998 solo album, Another World. Tell us a little bit about this project, because it's part of your Gold series. Is that the right way to describe it?
Yes, it's Brian May's Gold series of, supposedly reissues, but I think this stuff will be new to so many people out there because it hasn't been available on Spotify and Apple and all those things. And there weren't any videos made at the time, and I've been making up for that, making some videos over the last few weeks, which is going to be really interesting. So yeah, 1998 was a pretty rough year for me, I think. Still wrestling with the fact that Freddie wasn't around anymore. I'd been out on tour all around the world as the Brian May Band with Cozy Powell, and we did great stuff. But I was coming to the conclusion that, I was going to say I didn't want to be Queen anymore. I'd already come to that conclusion, I think. There was a kind of overreaction, I think, because we couldn't be Queen. I just didn't want to think about it. Much later came the recognition. Well, I think during the course of making this album, probably, I realized that Queen was always in me and I was always in Queen in some strange way. So there's a bit of a reassessment of myself as a person and as a musician. We just finished the Made in Heaven album, which was putting together all those wonderful little bits which Freddie left for us to work with after he'd gone. And that was a real labor of love, putting together all that stuff meticulously, carefully, beautifully, and getting great satisfaction out of making whole songs out of bits and pieces. But also painfully, because you're listening to Freddie's voice the whole time, day in and day out, doing little polishes on his vocal, trying to make the best out of what he could do at the time. And I love that album. I really think it might be the best Queen album ever made in heaven. The strange thing, and it's ironical now looking back on it, was one of the people who came in and rescued me, gave me energy. It was Taylor Hawkins. Suddenly he's there. He's drumming for this track which I've written for a video game called Cyborg. And he comes in full of joy and laughs and fun, like a little monkey climbing all over it, and just full of this passion. And I love that track, and I view it again with even more love now, because now we lost Taylor, which to me is such a tragedy. God, the world has lost a great force.
The fact that Taylor Hawkins is on that album now it's almost like a bittersweet tragedy, and I hate drawing tragedy into the world of rock and roll, because rock and roll is so joyous and lifts up so many people's hearts. But I feel that we always have to touch on a bit of tragedy, and the fact that you'd lost Cozy and Taylor came in. Tell us how he made you feel when he came in, because, remembering the happier times first, how was it having Taylor Hawkins to sort of lift you in those sessions for this album?
It was wonderful, not because he was the famous Taylor Hawkins or the famous Foo Fighters, because they weren't famous by then. They were just starting off. And they were great in those early days. There was a fantastic sort of raw magic. I remember seeing them at Brixton Academy, blowing the place apart with just, because they didn't seem to take themselves seriously. They just kind of knocked down all the barriers. And Taylor was a kid, really. He'd just come out of drumming for Alanis Morissette, and he had an opportunity now to do what he really wanted to do, which was play hard rock. The funny thing was, he turned out to be the greatest Queen fan in the world. And that was always a shock to me, because he seemed to be a lot cooler than we were, I think Taylor Hawkins single-handedly made Queen cool to a new generation, because he knew everything about us, everything at that point. He and Pat Smear gave us an award at some ceremony. I can't even remember where it was now. But it became obvious at that point, really early on, that they knew more about us than we knew. It's always been a great thing. So he was excited to come in and play. I was excited to have him in there because, my God, I hadn't really seen anybody hit the drums like that. Now, I've seen a lot of the world's greatest drummers and been very fortunate to work with them, but Taylor was like some kind of lightning. I don't know what it was that he had in his body, but it's extraordinary. And whenever I saw Foo Foo Fighters concerts, I ended up just watching Taylor the whole time because the way his body moves and the precision, the speed, the passion was extraordinary, and there are some extraordinary drummers around, and I know lots of them, but Taylor, I think everyone would agree, was a very special golden boy. I was speaking to him a week before this terrible accident happened, and he's full of joys, just full of laughs and full of fun. Saying, when are we going to get together? We need to make more music, all this kind of stuff. Like you say, I don't like to wallow in tragedy. I don't like to linger there. But this is life. Life is full of pain and joy and grief. And you have to come through it all and just kind of live with it and live it. And music is the great way of healing, I think, more than anything else. We all heal by sharing stuff through music, and God knows rock music is the best music for that. That's why I do it. I don't think there's any other music which is food for the soul like rock music is.
I think one of the things that really makes this album stand out, Brian, is the fact that it still sounds really fresh, because it's like it's listening to Brian May exploring a lot of things that we kind of forget you can do almost. But hearing you with Jeff Beck on The Governor, it's like, you exploring that bluesy side, which, we know you can do, but we just don't see that sort of side of your personality that often. Tell us a bit about that track, because I love that, and I love Jeff. I love the idea of you and Jeff together.
Yeah, well, Jeff is one of those people who makes me not want to play guitar, because I just want to watch him. He's incredible, and having him in the room was extraordinary. I wrote the track all about him and took it to him, and he was sort of in disbelief. He's like, really? No, it's not about me, whatever, And I kind of sketched out the places where I wanted him to explore, but of course gave him a very free rein on what he could play. And then once he came into the studio, plugged in, switched on, and those fingers just baffle me. I can't figure out how that stuff comes out of those fingers. It's like watching Mozart and thinking, how does that happen? Because Jeff is extraordinary. He's, I would say, I don't like to put people in categories or whatever, and polls are always rather silly, but he's got to be one of the greatest musicians on the planet ever. But Jeff is a phenomenon. He's an absolute phenomenon of the world, and it was extraordinary for me to be able to interact with him in this way. And I've put a marker down. I've said that he is the Governor. He is my hero, and I would stand by that.
Well, I guess you must have seen him play, you're sort of back in the day, way before you knew him, right?
Yeah, I saw him play in the Yardbirds. I probably saw maybe his first ever show with the Yardbirds. And it was at the Marquee. We'd have to check with Jeff. But I remember he was playing this Les Paul, and I don't think I'd ever seen a Les Paul like that close up. And he was making incredible noises. And then he took the guitar off at one point and just stood it and rotated it on the floor. And all these feedback noises came out. And it was like, well, magic doesn't even go there. I just thought, this is the way a guitar needs to be played. The guitar needs to speak for itself. It's like the guitar had a voice almost independent of who was holding it. I also remember that night, there were some people in the audience chanting for Eric Clapton to get back up, because some people were angered that Jeff had replaced Eric in the Yardbirds, and they were chanting Eric, Clapton, whatever. And Clapton was there, and he got up, and the two of them played together. So I will never forget that. I was just saying to someone this morning how lucky I felt I was to be a kid in the 50s, to experience the birth of rock and roll, those first screamings of Little Richard and Elvis and all that stuff, Rock Around the Clock. It was just the beginning of a new era, which we're still in. I think every rock and roll artist owes such a colossal amount to those pioneer rock artists of the 50s, because it wasn't normal. That wasn't what people did. You had Johnny Ray, you had Frank Sinatra, crooned and sang and put a bit of emotion in, but it was very smooth and kind of safe, I suppose. Suddenly comes Little Richard screaming his heart out, and everything became dangerous. And danger is what rock is, apart from being, I think it has these qualities of being very open, very honest, but danger is an important ingredient. That's why everybody loves Guns N' Roses, because the danger. It shouldn't be something that you learn at school. It should be something that comes out of your heart and is just about uncontrollable.
Now, Brian, we must talk about the Hendrix song on this album and your interpretation of One Rainy Wish. I mean, I know you're a huge Hendrix fan, But I wanted to sort of know why or what made you take on that particular track.
I've always loved that track because I think it's a real dream. I wrote the Prophet song about a real dream that I had, and I'm pretty sure that that was a real dream of Jimi Hendrix. And it has this wonderful floating quality. It's not typical of his work, but I just always loved it. And I love the way he sings. He was very self-conscious about his singing, I know. He would always sing behind a screen because he didn't want to be seen in the studio to sing. I only know this because we toured with his road manager for years, the wonderful Jerry Stickles, who used to tell me lots of Jimi Hendrix stories. And I was lucky enough to have Eddie Kramer come along, who was Jimmy's producer. He came and sat in my studio and we did this Hendrix tribute together, which was really great. Again, I consider myself so lucky. And I loved it. And I wanted to put my own little thing, the little stamps on it, my little trademarks, I suppose. Funny thing is, I've never really tried to play like Jimi Hendrix because I can't. And I don't think anyone can play like Jimmy. He's from another planet.
I have to talk to you about Ian Hunter and this album because you got him in for your version of All the Way from Memphis. You and Mott the Hoople have history.
Mott the Hoople taught us so much just by being Mott the Hoople and by having us on tour and being so generous to us. They actually allowed us to have sound checks as a support band, which a lot of people don't, you know. A lot of people feel threatened by their support band. They saw us go on and get a great reaction and they always encouraged it, which is great. Partly because they knew they would kill every night. There was no doubt. When Mott the Hoople hit that stage, it was a riot. And we learned from them. We learned how to connect with our audience, how to give them what they want and give them a little bit of what they didn't know they wanted, and just to connect.
I'm kind of curious as to how you look back on this album now. I know this reissue has lots of extra things added to it, and you've spent time with it again, almost as though when you were describing spending time with Freddie's voice for Made in Heaven, you were going back and listening through to stuff. How does it feel revisiting yourself?
It's been surprising. As with the first one, I thought I would be older and wiser and sort of know better, but I feel I don't. I feel like I'm still the same kind of kid who made that album. If I was making an album now, it would be very much like that. So I didn't feel the urge to change anything in the main album. We just polished it up, remastered it or whatever. I didn't change any of the mixes or anything. So I feel like it's me now.
Once you've done this and once you've dealt with this, you're putting your Queen shoes back on as well. How do you feel about that?
I feel good. A little nervous because it's been a while. 2 years since we finished off in Australia and headed back to England right into lockdown. That was pretty much a jolt, from traveling the world, Korea, Japan. It was an amazing, beautiful tour, that. One of the most successful tours we've ever done, including the Firefight concert in Sydney, which was a bit like Live Aid, something amazing. And you come back, and I was confined to my house in London for months. Couldn't get into the studio, couldn't get out to tour, couldn't even busk in the streets. So I took to Instagram. And how wonderful through Instagram to be able to encourage young artists of all kinds, musicians, but also visual artists, poets, the lot. I love it. I'm happy to be alive and happy to still be able to interact. And
this is what's wonderful, though. Again, you've taken a positive out of what was a huge negative for so many of us at lockdown, but it brought around a different side of you, probably one that you maybe wouldn't have even thought about doing if you hadn't been in that situation. So you've managed to see a glimpse of light in there. And I think a lot of people actually did, go through the lockdown journey with Brian May. It was, because what else were we doing apart from looking at a phone going, when can I go out?
That is good for me. I like it. I think that's the way to be. Like they say, if life delivers you lemons, you're going to make lemonade.
Yeah. Well, Brian, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with you. And for all the Planet Rock listeners, I know feel exactly the same. And I know we'll see you again. But for now, thank you.
Thank you.